My name's Dave DeBow, founder of MoneyPartnerFormula.com, and this show is built for everyday real estate investors who are actively doing deals and looking to scale using other people's money. So if you're an active real estate investor and you want to get featured on this show to talk about your own real estate and capital raising experiences, then just go to daveinterviewsyou.com. Now let's get rolling with this episode, and remember to subscribe for daily interview content. Welcome back, folks. Another great episode. Today, zooming in from beautiful Michigan. We've got a real estate broker, a commercial broker, a real estate investor, someone who's been around the game for quite some time, understands it from a whole bunch of different angles. And today we're going to be talking about net lease investments, which I'm very excited to hear about because I think I know what they are. I think you might think you know what they are, but this guy definitely knows what they are, and he's going to explain it step by step. So Dan Lewkowicz, welcome to the call. Great to have you.
Yeah, thank you so much. I appreciate it. Been looking forward to this, and I'm happy to be here.
All right, Dan. So let's start first things first. You focus a lot as a broker in net lease investments. So can you give us the layman's definition of what exactly that means?
Yeah, absolutely. As a high-level overview, the way I like to define what net lease is to define what it isn't. And one of the common types of real estate investing a lot of people are familiar with is multifamily. So I want to contrast net lease to multifamily to kind of hammer home what net lease really is. So let's just say you've got a Wendy's property, right? Your typical average Wendy's property off the highway. Wendy's is paying, for the purposes of our example, $125,000 of base rent. Okay, so that's your top line number on your P&L. That's your income, $125,000. Now, down the corner, right, you've got a nice neighborhood with a small multifamily property. And guess what? That multifamily property is bringing in $125,000. That's the gross collected rent. That's the top line number on the P&L. Okay, now here's where the distinctions really come into play. If you go to the multifamily property, you're going to have a lot of expenses, right? You're going to have things like taxes, insurance. You're going to have, maintenance of the property. You're going to have management, vacancy. You're going to have to pay to shovel the snow, plow the snow in the parking lots, cut the grass.
It sounds like you must live in Michigan.
Right, exactly, right? Whatever it is, whatever. Yeah,
I hear you. I'm in Canada.
Out there, yeah, you got it even worse than we do probably at some point. But anyway, you've got tons of expenses. You might be lucky if that 125,000, gets slashed in half, and you've got $65,000 in net operating income, right? So $125,000 gross collected rents, $65,000 expenses. You're left with somewhere in the $60,000 range in terms of your net operating income. Go back to the Wendy's property, okay? $125,000 top line income. But guess what? In this case, the tenant pays your taxes. The tenant pays your insurance. The tenant pays for all management, maintenance, grass cutting, snow plowing, whatever it is. Your net operating income, because your expenses are zero, is $125,000. So I think this example really shows you what a net lease property is. Now, what I described was an absolute triple net property. There's also double net properties, which are exactly the same, except the roof and structure are landlord responsibilities. And in some cases, the roof, structure, and parking lot are landlord responsibilities. But as you see in general, the whole net lease, it comes from the name net lease. That rental number is net to you.
Very, very cool. So how did you kind of first come across this and decide to focus on it as a broker?
Some things in life seem like, happenstance. Maybe they are, maybe they aren't. This was one of them. I was at the time a business development executive at Amazon, pretty well-known company some people might have heard of. And my father was always like hammering in my head, you got to find your way into the real estate department because Amazon is able to take dirt and empty warehouses and turn them into gold by doing what? By signing long-term leases with this great credit tenant, Amazon. Now the building and the dirt and the property is worth so much more. So I never was able to make my way into the Amazon real estate department. However, luck would have it, or fortune would have it, that a very prominent net lease boutique brokerage here in Michigan reached out to me because they were reaching out to top sales professionals in many different industries to try to get them to come into the brokerage world. So when I got that email, I said, you know what, this is interesting. Let me look into it. And keep in mind, my background is in single family house flipping in Michigan. But more specifically, in the Tri-County area, but also in the city of Detroit. So I'm used to a single family deal, right, where I come in and buy a property and create a 35 cap, right?
Yeah.
So when I heard in net lease that they were selling Taco Bells for 5 caps, my real estate mind was kind of like fracturing, right?
How does
It's
this
kind of a,
work? Yeah.
yeah, exactly. So, but
Mm.
the point is that because I understood the concept from what my dad was telling me, when they reached out, I did a lot of research. I said, you know what, this sounds awesome. And at the time, I was like transitioning out of house flipping, where
Mm.
I was breaking my back, and I was doing, I was essentially an adult daycare specialist, babysitting contractors, and dealing with people breaking in and stealing things, and
Yeah.
just it was a lot of risk, my own capital, hard money loans, all that stuff. So getting into brokerage to me was like a breath of fresh air, and I haven't looked back since.
Very, very cool. All right. Well, that was a very, very good definition and explanation of what net lease is all about. So maybe walk us through, you gave us the Wendy's example. Who are your typical clients that you're working with that are, well, first of all, are you typically working on the Wendy's side to find these kind of properties, or are you working on the property owner side to find the Wendy's guys? You doing everything in between? What does your business look like,
So
Dan?
typically I'm on the ownership side finding a buyer. The
Got it.
majority of my deals are listings. So I definitely represent the buyers also in the majority of the cases, but I don't do a tremendous amount of buyer representation. I typically reserve that for clients who have bought from me and we've established a relationship. But typically I'm representing an owner who wants to sell their building. Sometimes they also want to lease their building, so I'll put the property up for lease as well. That's not my main focus. But in terms of like the investor profile, it really varies. I have clients who are merchant developers for specific tenants. They source a piece of property, scrape it, build a building, sign a lease with the tenant, cash flow for 2 years, give me a call, have me sell it.
Hmm.
I have other clients that have just built up incredible portfolios of resorts, hotels, student housing, fast food restaurants, strip malls, et cetera, et cetera. And then, they're getting older and they want to, trim down their holdings, so to speak. I have clients that operate funds. Like I've got a great client who raises capital from investors, and then he purchases very specific types of shopping centers from me all around the country. And he puts them in his fund, and then he gives a specific return to his investors. I'm trying to think of if there's any other major profiles out there, but sometimes I'm dealing with people that right now I'm dealing with a partnership dispute, two partners that own a large industrial property, and they don't want to, their loan is coming
They're
due,
getting
and
a
they don't want to.
divorce.
Yeah, they're getting a divorce. They don't, their loan is coming due, and they don't want to sign on the loan together,
Yeah.
right? So that's why they're selling. So it's all different types of circumstances, but
Interesting.
typically I'm dealing with highly sophisticated investors. And I can think of my last development deal I closed a few weeks ago, about 2 weeks ago. It was sold to a publicly traded real estate investment trust. So again, highly sophisticated buyer as well.
Very cool. So that brings me to another question. I don't know if you've run across this, Dan, but do you ever have some not so highly sophisticated people reaching out to you, you know, going from wanting to do flips and whatnot to get into the commercial space? And if so, what are some of your pet peeves about dealing with inexperienced commercial property investors?
Yeah, so listen, I think I'm different than most. I'll give out my number at the end of every podcast that I'm on, and I love when people reach out to me, even if they're brand new, even if they've all the dumb questions, right? I love it because I didn't get here by myself. I got here through the help of various mentors. And to me, when somebody reaches out and tells me about their journey and asks for advice, and we're hashing out things that are going to be impactful in their life, and then 6 months later they give me the courtesy of calling back and saying, Dan, look at where I am now. Look at what I did. That feels great. Not every day in my job, not every moment feels great, but those moments feel absolutely great. So for me, I'm never upset when somebody reaches out and is like a newbie investor. I love that kind of stuff. What I will say is like some faux pas in terms of being a new investor,
Yeah.
just not to knock anyone, but to help them to be more successful, is number one, just be it's with anything in life and business, is be transparent. If you're not ready to buy, tell the broker I am not ready to buy, right?
Mm.
Because there's nothing worse than putting in all this effort and everything, and you find the guy the perfect building and he's not ready to buy, or she's not ready to buy. So be transparent about that. That's really important. And
Yeah.
then another thing, kind of like a story analogy I give is, we bought a new home, thankfully 2.5 years ago before the rates went way up. But it was a totally different neighborhood, totally different style of homes, and I've got a real estate, background, obviously, right? But still a lot of differences. I remember we walked into the first house and I was like, we're writing an offer right now. This is the one, like, it's amazing. Everything about it. We can move in on Sunday. And then I stopped myself. I said, you know what? Let's look at a few more houses. And what
Yeah.
happened when we looked at a few more houses? I realized, oh, you know what? I will not buy a house without a garage. I want a finished basement. I want 9-foot ceilings, whatever the things are. My point is that the more houses that we looked at, the better we got at knowing what was a deal, what was true market, and what did we want. So it's the same thing with commercial properties. So my advice is that if you're looking to buy a deal, don't buy your first deal. Don't buy your 10th deal. Okay, underwrite 100 deals. I guarantee you, when you underwrite 100 deals, you're going to become an expert in the value of that type of property. You're going to know when you see a deal. You're going to know when you see a red flag. So I think one of the biggest mistakes people make, and I've made it before, thankfully it was only in single family homes in Detroit, right? So my risk was limited, but I still made the mistake. And that was buying too quickly, right? Don't be in a rush to buy. There's something that people forget. You make your money on the buy. The sell is dictated by the market 100%. Unless you get some miracle buyer, the sell is dictated by the market. Whatever the market is, that's what the property is going to sell. There's nobody that has a magic wand that's going to change that. But if you're able to buy right, those dollars that you save are dollars that go in your pocket. So keep that in mind.
Very, very well said. So, Dan, when it comes to somebody who's listening to this and perhaps they're in the single family home space like you were when you're doing your flips and whatnot, and they're thinking, hey, this whole triple net idea sounds really appealing. I've been dealing with tenants and toilets and all that stuff that goes with being a landlord. I kind of like the idea of my tenant taking care of all that stuff. What would you kind of recommend to people as kind of first steps or first kind of properties that you can look at that are on the smaller side for triple net lease? Because the Wendy's example, I'm going to guess that might be out of the scope for most mom and pop real estate investors. What would be within reason for somebody who's getting started?
So, whenever somebody comes to me with this question, I first ask them a variety of questions because my answer is not going to be the same for you as it is going to be to the next person. So,
Yeah.
the first thing I do in my mind, I want to put them into a bucket, right? Because I want to know what level of passivity are they looking for? Are they looking for a sitting on the beach sipping a margarita passivity, or are they okay maybe with a little bit more, let's say lease up or management or labor, et cetera, et cetera? What kind of return are they looking for? So if we're going to group people in two buckets, let's
Yeah.
say one is okay with a little bit more of an active investment.
Yeah,
One is
let's
okay
start
with,
with those guys because that'll be most mom and pops. They're already actively
yeah,
doing stuff. So let's look at that first, if you
sure.
would.
So I love the shopping center space
Hmm.
because much like multifamily, at least maybe multifamily of the previous era, you can force appreciation in multi-tenant retail, shopping centers in a way that you can't in single tenant net lease deals. What I mean by that is if you look at a shopping center, you can do things like increase the occupancy, get rid of bad tenants.
But well,
You know,
give me a definite, like, paint me a picture of when you're talking about a shopping center and we're talking about a mom and pop real estate investor. You're not talking about a mall here. You're talking about like a
No,
strip
I'm
mall
talking
type
about
thing. So
a neighborhood shopping center. So
yeah,
picture 5 to 12 tenants,
got it.
anywhere from 6 to 20,000 square feet, right?
Got it.
And price point wise, picture anywhere from 800,000 or $1 million is really where you're going to start seeing some decent inventory, all the way up to 2.5 million, 3 million, depending on what you're looking for. Okay.
Perfect. Got it.
So these shopping centers are incredible. They're all over the country, right? And there's a lot of opportunity there because number one, you've got a lot of mom and pop owners, so to speak, and all due respect to them, who just they kept up their shopping center, but they just wanted to go with the status quo. And even though
Yeah.
they could have asked for a higher rent, they just kept it the way it was. And over time, that compounds in a negative way, right? But as the new buyer, that's a positive because you have all that potential upside.
Mm.
So those 7 or 10 tenants, as their leases are expiring and they're ready to sign a new lease or a new tenant is going to come in, you can now renegotiate. And if they're paying $12 a foot rent, but the rent is really $15, guess what? That's just money in your pocket. So
Yeah.
that's number one. You can bring tenants up to market rent. You can increase the occupancy. You can get rid of delinquent tenants. You can bring in better tenants that are going to give you a lower cap rate on your exit because it's a better center, right? You can deploy some capital expenditures, maybe paint the building, make it look nice so that you attract those good tenants. And at the end of the day, you're going to be lowering cap rate, increasing net operating income, which is going to dramatically increase your value. There's one other thing I forgot to mention. So we talked about net lease deals in the single tenant arena. Well, in the multi-tenant arena, it's a little bit different, but it's also similar. So you typically have two different types of leases, generally speaking, in shopping centers. You have a net lease, okay, and a gross lease or a gross modified lease. Okay. Gross modified lease or gross lease just means tenant pays the rent, landlord's responsible for everything. Okay. These are the worst types of leases for ownership. These are the leases that we avoid or we eliminate or we convert. You don't necessarily have to avoid them, by the way. You can convert them. That's where you get massive upside. You can convert a lease from a gross modified lease to a net lease. And now what that means is the tenant pays their base rent, but they also pay, for example, in one form, their proportionate or pro rata share of the expenses. So let's say that let's make it easy, 10,000 square foot building, they occupy 1,500 square feet, that's 15%. They pay 15% of all the expenses, taxes, insurance, snow plowing, electrical, everything, okay? Management even admin, you can add in an admin fee that they have to pay. So now what you're doing is you're now increasing your NOI through conversion of gross leases to net leases, and you're lowering your cap rate because people would rather have the net leases. So that's a great way to maintain that. For me, I'm a value add guy. I don't like just buying something and holding it. I want to add value. This is a great way to maintain that value add perspective. A little bit more hands-on, but again, you can have a management company that can handle everything under your direction. I think there's great opportunity there. You can buy those, by the way. I'm not even talking about the trophy stuff in the 6 caps. I'm talking about 7.25, 8. I've had clients recently buy at 9, 9.5 cap, and that's entrance, right? Once you do these changes, you could be in the low to mid teens in your sleep. So I love those. That's one bucket. That's one investor. Now the other investor that says, nope, toes in the sand, sipping a margarita, I would say that you're going to want to get into a long-term triple net lease with a great tenant. You're going to have a lower cap rate. Today, you can expect somewhere in the 6s, maybe low to mid 6s. And if you're looking at something like a dollar store, the cap rates have really risen. That's probably in the low 7s for a new dollar store. So
this is more like the Wendy's example at the beginning of the call, right? It's a single tenant on a property type thing. Got it.
And so in that regard, you're going to be, in terms of price point, you're probably going to be starting around 1 million, 1.2 million. You can find stuff in the 800,000-900,000 space, but it may have some hair on the deal, may have some issues. But expect to spend $1 million, $1.2 million. If you get $1.5 million, you're going to start opening up. Once you're at $1,750,000, now there's some quick service restaurants available, fast food restaurants, $2 million, $2.25 million, even more. So somewhere between $1 million to $2.25 million, that's going to be your range there to get started. And keep in mind, if you don't have that kind of cash, that's okay. There are syndications and joint ventures in the net lease space. If somebody wants a good referral to one of my friends or colleagues, I'm always happy to make it.
Perfect. Well, Dan, that was fascinating. I really appreciate your big, broad stroke overview of how this whole works. I think we might have to have you on the show again to talk about the pros and the cons, because we've talked about the pros here. But if people want to reach out to you and find out more and connect with you, where can they go?
Yeah. So first of all, I'm very active on LinkedIn. I put out daily content. You can find me there. First name is Dan, last name Lewkowicz, Lewkowicz. Again, Lewkowicz. Reach out, connect with me. Tell me that you saw me on the Property Profits Real Estate Podcast. I got that, by the way. Okay. and that way I know where you came from. Additionally, if you own commercial real estate, you want to know what it's worth, you want to sell, you have questions. If you're new, right, you're getting into brokerage, you're getting into investing, you have questions, there's no dumb questions. Please reach out. I love it. It's the highlight of my career, honestly. My phone number, my direct line, is my cell phone. It's 248-943-2838. Again, 248-943-2838. If there's anything I can do, it would be my absolute pleasure.
Awesome, Dan. Thank you very much. And everybody, we'll see you on the next episode. Hey there, I really hope you enjoyed that episode. And as always, if you want to listen to more daily interview content, make sure you subscribe. And if you're an active real estate investor and you're doing deals and you'd like to get featured on this show, then just head over to daveinterviewyou.com. Now at moneypartnerformula.com, we help real estate investors to create a process for predictably getting capital so they can do more deals without relying on hard money lenders or the banks. We do this by building them a private capital marketing system. Now, if you want help turning yourself into a big money capital attraction machine, then book a call with our team to see how we can help. Just visit moneypartnerformula.com to find out more. All right, take care, and we'll see you on the next interview.